For the first 25 days of December, we're going to be doing a readathon for my newest book, Nick. We know this isn't for everyone, so if you don't want us to read you a bedtime story every night, we'll still have our regular vlogs every Tuesday.
But if you do want to come along, then come on!
Today we're going to be reading chapter 15, A Dream Turned Dark. Upstairs in the cottage were 3 bedrooms. One was for Faye, the other was for Olivia, and the last one belonged to Mr. and Miss Pransley. After supper, Nick, Emma, and Gilbert were led upstairs to settle in for the night. The little elven girls had made Emma promise she would bunk with them, and so the 3 of them took to Olivia's bedroom. Olivia wanted to get Emma's advice on a boy she liked at school, and Faye wanted to play dress-up, but they settled with Emma reading them a bedtime story. Nick could hear Emma reading the story through the wall. He lay in Faye's tiny bed, listening to Emma's story. It was a fairy tale, he realized. There was an evil witch, a captive young girl, and a handsome prince who fought the witch's dark magic and saved the girl from succumbing to a fate far worse than death. Emma hadn't even gone to the end of the book when she slammed it shut. Nick jumped from the thud as it was such an aggressive one. At first he thought that one of them might have fallen off the bed, but then he put his ear to the wall. He listened, and the more he listened, the more his smile grew. Emma went on to teach Miss Pransley's daughters what it was like to be a girl. She insisted that they'd never wait for a prince to come and save them, because they were perfectly capable of doing it themselves. She told the girls that she loved to bake, and so did other girls she knew. She went on to tell them that she didn't like to wear dresses, and that was alright even though a lot of girls did enjoy wearing dresses. Emma shared with them that she used to enjoy playing with dolls, but she also used to enjoy playing with toy dinosaurs too. Emma could be sweet, but also be brave. Nick liked that about her. She didn't fit the mold of what society told her to be. She was her own person in her own right. She just enjoyed being Emma, whatever that was, and whatever that meant. Emma was a girl of many things, but what she most certainly was not was a maiden waiting to be rescued by a prince. Not long after that, and all the girls had fallen asleep. Nick, however, wasn't so lucky. Faye's bed was tiny and uncomfortable, a size suited for a toddler, not a 15-year-old boy. Nick had to fold his legs up to his chest and curl himself into a ball, all so that his arms and legs didn't hang off the sides. It was quite the frustrating position, and his irritation only grew after seeing Gilbert curled up in a ball on a pillow and snoring. He didn't even know mice could snore, but apparently they could, and it was obnoxiously loud. Nick got himself in the best position he could. Although his body was tired, his mind was not, and he laid there restlessly toying with his snow globe. He enjoyed shaking it and watching the snow swirl through and around the frosted village. He gazed through the glass dome at the great hall. It was a building that stood tall amongst tiny homes and little cottages, all surrounding a town square. The longer and harder Nick gazed into the snow globe, the more he could hear the ghost of laughter and see elves crowded in the streets. Within a moment, all was silent again as the snowflakes drifted to the floor of the snow globe, and the elves and the echoes of laughter were gone, leaving Nick to believe that his imagination had gotten the best of him. He then traced the words engraved along the silver plate with his finger, mumbling along as he went. From 2 worlds a child will be born, with a spark in their heart that shines brighter than all. To those who dwell in the dark beware, I warn. If this child fights, then you shall fall. Nick pondered what it meant, and wondered even more why it was written on his snow globe. The more he thought about it, the more his head ached. His gaze shifted from the inscription back through the glass of the dome. CLAUS village looked so lovely in the snow globe, but Nick knew that it wasn't as lovely as it seemed. It wasn't a place of happiness, but one of terror, lost hope and danger, and all the family he knew and loved were being taken there. Nick began to wonder if he would ever get the chance to see them again. It was starting to feel a little more unlikely with every day that passed. If hope was a candle, Nick's was nearly down to a wick. He rolled over and had to catch himself from rolling right off the edge after forgetting how small the bed was. Nick then spotted moonlight drifting through the bedroom window. He threw his legs over the edge of the bed and got to his feet. He wandered over to the window and then perched himself on the sill, looking up. The moon sat bright in the night, like a guardian watching over Bergen, its icy glow surrounded by clusters of brilliant stars, standing guard as they twinkled ever so brightly. But there was one star brighter than all the rest combined, that sat alone far from any cluster, and was out in the great distance, seemingly lost in the dark abyss. Nick smiled. Lost Star Orphanage, he thought. The little lone star reminded him of where he came from, and even a bit of himself as well. He felt very connected to that star, as he too was amongst others and yet still alone on his own journey. "You're special, Nick." Sister Meriwether's last words chimed in his head like a song remembered out of nowhere. More special than you could possibly imagine. There were many things Nick felt in his 15 years, but special had never been one of them. He felt plain, ordinary, and unwanted, as his parents left him at an orphanage with no explanation at all. He gazed up into the night sky, staring at that lone star shimmering in the dark. He wondered if maybe, just maybe, that he possibly was someone special. He just had a difficult time thinking what it was about him that made him so, if there was anything at all. You aren't the first orphan, and certainly not the last, to hope they're special. Nick spun around, and there, in the crack between the closet doors, was an emerald eye piercing through the darkness. The doors began to creak open, and Nick suddenly felt colder than he had ever felt in all his life. Paralyzed, he expelled shallow, frozen breaths. Nick shuddered in horror as Lord Avonmark emerged from the closet. Every little boy and every little girl gazes up into a starry sky and hopes they're special. But the fact is, they aren't. His emerald cloak rippled around his hooves while approaching Nick slowly. There's nothing special about you, Nick. In fact, there never was. You're weak and ordinary. Every word he spoke made Nick feel smaller and smaller until soon he felt a dreadful sensation of worthlessness cripple him. You've always been nothing more than a pathetic little orphan who was unloved by even his own parents. Avonmark took a deep breath, and then his lips relaxed into a toothy smile. You're afraid, he gritted his fangs. I can smell it on you. He inhaled again, this time holding it in to enjoy it longer. Your fear smells rich like salted chocolate. I can taste the darkness emitted from your fear, feeling melt in my mouth like butter. He then exhaled, and his emerald eyes were left aglow. Nick spoke through a cold shiver tracing up his spine. You're not real, his teeth rattled. He felt like he was freezing from the inside out. You're just a dream. A dream? No. Avonmark walked straight through Nick like smoke, then turned back with a twisted grin. But a nightmare. He strolled over to Nick's bed and found the snow globe left on top of the nightstand. He snatched it up, the glass dome swallowed up in his clenching claw. Nick, he shook the snow globe, watching the snow swirl around inside. You know what I want, and you know I will find it. So please, make this easier on yourself and hand over the stone I desire. He placed the snow globe back on the counter. If not for yourself, do it for the sweet little orphans who are being shipped to me as we speak. I don't have it, he tried to swallow, but his throat felt cold and raw. Please, I'll give you whatever you want, just leave my family alone. I want the stone, Avonmark snatched Nick by the throat and rammed him into a wall. Give me the stone and your family will be spared. He lifted Nick up the wall while throttling him. Refuse me again and I promise you, the orphans will pay. Avonmark released his grip, leaving Nick falling to the floor, choking on his frozen cough. Nick fought his way to his feet, massaging his aching throat while his buckling knees struggled to keep him standing. There he watched as Lord Avonmark stomped through the bedroom, his sharp fangs dripping with saliva. What? Nick's throat tightened, and so he swallowed and tried again. What makes you think I have the stone? Avonmark froze, his long scarred snout slowly shifting to face Nick again. It was then that Nick caught a spark of curiosity glowing in his eyes. You really don't know, do you? He smirked when he realized. What a clever elf that Sister Meriwether was to keep it from you. Nick felt something dark snap inside himself. "Don't talk about her," he shouted. "You dare tell me what to do?" All Avamar did was look in Nick's eyes, and instantly he collapsed to his knees, screaming in pain. "I am Lord Avamar, ruler of all of elven kind. You will show me respect or grovel before me. Have I made myself understood?" Nick fought through convulsions of agony jolting through him. He struggled to nod, and even that caused him discomfort. Lord Avamar released his magical hold. Nick reached for the windowsill, eyes twitching while his muscles spasmed, and used the sill to help himself back on his feet again. Avamar stomped through the bedroom. Faye had left a few of her toys on the floor, and they crushed under the weight of his hooves. "I will find you, Nick." He picked up a porcelain doll and squeezed his claw until the doll's face shattered in his grip. "And when I do, I will end you." Nick wanted to respond with something clever, something that would show Lord Avamar that he wasn't about to back down, but his blotchy face and rough wheezing made it impossible. Suddenly, a light from outside caught Nick's attention. He looked out of the window and down into the street, and there he found a carriage rolling up to the cottage. It turned into the courtyard where it parked in the snow. The doors then opened, and out came Belsnickel, accompanied by 2 sailors. Nick turned back to Lord Avamar to find him smiling. "You're not really here, are you? You've only been distracting me. Clever, very clever boy." "I have to wake up." Nick grabbed his skull, closed his eyes, and squeezed. "Come on, Nick, wake up. You have to wake up." He repeatedly whacked his head with his fist. "Wake up, wake up, wake up." He opened his eyes, finding himself back in bed. He kicked his blanket off and jumped to his feet, and then threw himself against the window. There was the parked carriage, and Belsnickel and his goons heading for the front door of the cottage. Nick slipped out of his borrowed pajamas and frantically put on his own clothes. He fought to put on his patchy sweatshirt and his jacket, all while squeezing his feet into his boots. He then raced back to bed and snatched Gilbert from off a pillow, stuffing the mouse into his coat pocket, which Gilbert was growing accustomed to. He hadn't a moment to spare, and so he didn't even bother to tie his shoes. He just rushed out of the bedroom without a thought to stop him. Nick began to pass through the dim-lit hallway, knowing very well who it was knocking on the front door. He was tiptoeing toward Olivia's bedroom door when he was stopped by candlelight flickering downstairs. "Who's there?" Nick could hear Miss Pransley in the room below him, making way to the front door. "I asked who's there," she repeated, this time making sure to increase the volume of her voice to alert the entire house. Belsnickel banged on the door. "Open up, elven woman." He banged on the door again. "By orders of Lord Avamar, open this door." "Mama?" Nick hadn't noticed Faye until that moment, as she was standing in the shadows at the top of the staircase, looking down. "Faye," Nick whispered, "don't go down there." But the little elven girl who was too worried for her mother, so she didn't listen. She scurried off down the stairs and disappeared. Nick took after Faye, but stopped on the first step of the staircase. Bam! The 2 sailors rammed the front door down. Belsnickel strutted into the cottage, grinning as he seemed to enjoy breaking into the Prancy's home. His smile swept off his face when he caught Miss Pransley raising his hands, readying with a spell. "Seize her," he ordered. The 2 sailors grabbed Miss Pransley by force, pinning her arms behind her back. Belsnickel approached her. "You dare attempt to use your magic against me?" he teased her with a smile. "You pathetic poor excuse of an elf, a traitor amongst your own kind." "I'm no traitor." Miss Pransley held her chin high. "That is you, Belsnickel." He snatched her face and dug his long yellowish nails into her cheek. "Oh, how I will enjoy listening to your screams." He released her, then threw a glance into the living room where he spotted Faye trembling behind the sofa. "Take the girl," he ordered the sailors. "I'm sure Lord Avamar will enjoy the child of a traitor in his custody." "No!" Miss Pransley squirmed and wrinkled, but the sailors had her arms tied firmly together. The second sailor went off to find Faye hiding. He snatched her up and threw her over his shoulder, kicking and screaming. "Let her go!" Miss Pransley cried and wailed. "Let my baby go!" Belsnickel listened to her heart-wrenching screams like he were listening to an elegant symphony. He enjoyed himself, just like he said he would. Nick took a step further, prepared to charge down into the living room, when Gilbert popped out of his pocket and squeaked. He shook his head. Nick fought his instincts and listened to his friend. He went back up into the hall and quietly opened Olivia's bedroom door. To his surprise, Emma and Olivia were already up. Emma was dressed and Olivia was digging around in her wardrobe. "Emma!" Nick flew into the room with haste. "Belsnickel is here. He has Miss Pransley and Faye too. We know, Emma went on to fill Nick in. We heard banging downstairs, and then I heard Belsnickel's voice. I told the girls to stay put, but Faye was worried. She made herself vanish, and the next thing I knew, she was running downstairs. Got it, Olivia found it. It was a shiny, spherical object, a sort of trinket box, and it was painted red and sculptured with whimsical traces of gold throughout. Years ago, before Faye was born, my parents took me to New York City to visit our grandparents. I was very young, and so I hardly remember it. But what I do remember was Mr. McTwizzle's emporium of fantastic trinkets and toys. Bangs and crashes were heard arising from downstairs, and so Olivia got to her point more quickly. While I was there, Mr. McTwizzle helped me pick out this toy. It's a music box. It used to help me fall asleep at night, especially after waking up from a nightmare. She handed it to Emma. I want you to have it. Olivia, that's very sweet of you, but I can't take this from you. She insisted, please, it might help you bring back your family. Thank you. Emma began to open it, but Olivia was quick to slam it back shut. No, you mustn't, she stressed. The music box is enchanted by a fairy's voice. It'll put you right to sleep. Good to know. Emma stowed it away into Gilbert's satchel and then slung the bag over her shoulder. The three of you need to leave. Olivia waved a hand over to the window, and it popped open by magical means. I'll distract Belsnickel while you three make a run for the woods. Emma refused. No, Olivia, you're coming with us. I can't leave my mama and sister. Nick saw Emma's point. Olivia, Emma's right. You can't stay here. I'm afraid you're no match for Belsnickel. It doesn't matter. I'll buy you time. She pushed Nick and Emma toward the window. Go, she urged. Save your family. Nick had to force Emma up onto the windowsill and even had to give her a little push onto the roof. He then followed her, Gilbert popping out of his pocket and squeaking for Olivia to come with them. But Olivia had already snapped her fingers and the window slammed shut in their faces. The little elven girl then spun around, just as her bedroom door blasted from its hinges. The room rang with chunks of stone and splinters of wood, while a throng of dust and smoke came crashing down upon Olivia like a tidal wave. Nick caught just a glimpse of Belsnickel's angry face before sliding down the roof shingles. Emma had jumped from the roof and was already standing in the courtyard in a sheet of snow. Nick closed his eyes and leaped. By the time he opened them again, he was flat on his back in a pile of snow. Come on! Emma took his hand and together they raced into the woods. They had just reached the thicket when they hid behind a snow-covered birch and took a look back at the house. Something was happening in the upstairs window. Like a dozen colorful fireworks had all been set off at once. There were crackles of greens and sparks of reds, amongst shimmers and frizzles of golds and silvers. The cottage's walls cracked, and its windows all shattered. An explosion blasted the roof into smithereens. No! Emma fell to her knees and screamed, Olivia! Faye! She got back to her feet and ran, but a second explosion threw her back. Olivia! She shrieked, warm tears making way down her cheeks while she watched the cottage engulfed in flames. Faye! She moaned. Nick's eyes trembled as he watched flames burst through windows, then rip through the walls and soon swallowed the Pransley's home in an unruly inferno. They could feel the heat of the fire from inside the forest. Emma, the quiver in Nick's eyes had migrated to his voice. We need to get out of here. Through the remains of the upstairs window appeared the dark silhouette of Belsnickel, glaring back at him. Emma, now! Nick helped Emma up and forced her with him. They ducked into the thicket of birch just out of Belsnickel's view and scrambled through wild shrubs of hawthorn which cut their arms and tore their clothes as they fought their way through. They ran into the dark, consumed by the wood, listening to the explosions of the Pransley's family's little cottage. Throughout it all, Emma couldn't stop herself from crying for the little elven girls whom she had come to adore. Hope you guys enjoyed chapter 15. Come back tomorrow for chapter 16, Dunderwoods.